I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to a special edition of Sunday Insight. Unlike our usual show, which features a variety of topics and a panel of pundits, this morning I have a single guest, Deb Jordahl, one of the targets of the now defunct John Doe investigation. Deb has been a panelist on this show before, is a prolific writer, commentator, and political activist, but she's been out of the public spotlight for nearly 2 years, in part because she's been under a gag order, told that she could not speak about the case or what happened to her. Her life was turned upside down on October 3rd, 2013, when armed agents of the John Doe raided her family's home, seizing computers, phones, and personal items. Her kids were ordered not to tell anyone at school what had happened. This morning, she will tell her story. But first, some background. After the epic battle in Madison over Act 10, which limited public employee collective bargaining powers, unions and the state Democratic Party launched a massive effort to recall Republican state senators and Governor Scott Walker. Liberal groups mobilized around the effort to defeat Walker, while conservatives rallied in support of the governor. In June 2012, as you know, Scott Walker defeated that recall, went on to win re-election in 2014, is now a candidate for president. But in the meantime, prosecutors led by Milwaukee Democrat District Attorney John Chisholm launched a sweeping secret investigation that targeted 29 conservative organizations and the Walker campaign, accusing them of illegally coordinating their pro-Walker efforts. Significantly, no similar investigation was launched against liberal or Democrat groups on the other side of the recall campaigns. That John Doe investigation has since been shut down. No one was ever charged. The presiding judge threw out the subpoenas, saying that no laws had been broken. Last month, the state Supreme Court shut down the probe definitively with a stinging decision that said that the prosecutors had, quote, employed theories of law that do not exist in order to investigate citizens who were wholly innocent of any wrongdoing. The court ruled the special prosecutor was the instigator of what the justices called a perfect storm of wrongs that was visited upon the innocent targets and those who dared to associate with them. The only thing the targets were guilty of was their decision to engage in constitutionally protected free speech. Prosecutors may try to appeal the Supreme Court's decision to the U.S. Supreme Court, but that's considered a legal long shot. And in the meantime, the Doe is shut down, and the court has ordered Chisholm and the other prosecutors to return the evidence they seized and to destroy other materials. That decision also means that the gag orders slapped on targets are no longer in effect, and they are now free to speak out, and they are. When we come back, we'll hear Deb Jordahl's story. Last month, the Wisconsin Supreme Court shut down the John Doe investigation targeting state conservative activists, saying that the prosecutor's legal theory was unsupported either in law or reason, but that decision lay far in the future on October 3rd, 2013, when the homes of conservatives were raided by armed agents. One of those homes was owned by Deb Jordahl. She's a Madison political consultant who has advised Governor Walker, as well as nonprofit advocacy groups like Wisconsin Club for Growth. So, good morning, Deb, and thanks for joining me. First of all, just tell the story. What happened to you that morning? What was the raid like?
Well, I was in bed. It was dark out. I heard noise outside our house, and then I saw lights outside in the yard. I looked at the clock. It was 6 o'clock on the dot. The doorbell rang. I went downstairs. My husband was already at the door. An armed deputy sheriff from Dane County asked to come in. She said everything is fine, everything's okay, and then she said we have a warrant to search the house. She verified our identities. She asked about our son. She apparently was not aware that we also had a daughter. And then she said we need to get the kids up, and I asked if I could wake my children up, and she followed me right into their rooms. So when they were woken up, they saw an armed deputy standing next to their beds. We were all in our pajamas. We were corralled into the family room downstairs, and the deputy sheriff from Dane County proceeded to read us the warrant. which was extremely broad when it went through all of the different people and organizations that...
I just want to make this clear, that this is not an investigation of white-collar crime. We're not talking about terrorism, drug dealing, any of those things. This was an alleged campaign finance violation, and they staged this raid.
Yes. They allegedly were investigating a conspiracy to file a false campaign report or filing a false campaign report, which are things that I don't do. The organizations that I represent don't report to the Government Accountability Board, so I was a little puzzled as to how they came up with that alleged charge. Part of the warrant reading was a gag order, which said that we were not allowed to talk to anybody about this except our attorney. We couldn't tell anybody that there was a search at our home, that that there was an investigation or anything about the warrant. After after she was done reading it and we were sitting in our family room, it occurred to me that I really should call a lawyer. And so I started to get up from the sofa and I said I'd like to call my lawyer, and she came toward me and she said, "You're not calling anybody." So I was forced to sit back down.
So you asked to see talk to a lawyer, and you were refused permission to see a lawyer. Were you then Mirandized? Were you read your rights?
No, I was never read my rights, and I was told I could not call my lawyer while the raid was going on. They took my phone, and at one point she brought the phone to me and she said, "Before we take this away, are there any contact numbers that you want to get?" And I thought, well, do I really want this woman to know who my most important contacts are? So I didn't take any contacts. And
so what did they seize? They come to your house, and it's before dawn. This was coordinated raids of a number of people who were involved in conservative politics. What ultimately did they take from your house?
Well, some of the items I don't really know because they were so vaguely described, some of the paper files and documents that they took. But they took my phone, they took my computer, which of course has all of my business and all of my personal documents on it, bank records, medical records, kids' education records, all of my business records. They took my husband's phone and computer. They took a phone that was old that they found in the drawer. They took a couple iPod Nanos. They took my Nook. They took external hard drives that had backups from years past that belonged to me and my husband. They took my daughter's computer. They took another computer.
Oh, okay, hold it. So they took the computers from your children?
Yes.
As well?
Yes.
Okay.
They did leave one computer that belonged to my son, but they took another one that belonged to him. They took all kinds of paper files, and as I said, there were very, very vague descriptions of those files. They took a voice recorder. They took years' worth of pocket calendars that belonged to my husband.
And again, what they were trying to prove that there had been somehow a coordination between conservative groups supporting the conservative governor of the state of Wisconsin. Now, since the courts have ruled that, in fact, even if everything they had said was true, every one of their allegations were true, that it didn't constitute a crime because there's something called issue advocacy, which is protected by the First Amendment. Why did they raid your house? My colleague Jeff Wagner is a former federal prosecutor on radio, and he is so puzzled by this. He said, even in white-collar, bank crime stuff, we don't, knock on people's doors. We can just send a subpoena. Why do you think they came to your house that morning?
Well, my belief is that the reason they came to our house is they wanted to intimidate us, they wanted to harass us, and they had been conducting this investigation for over a year. And as we would come to learn, they had already collected almost everything that they could have hoped to get legally through the warrant. They obviously took things that had, no relationship to the warrant, things that belonged to other people. But they wanted the investigation to be public from their perspective.
Right.
So, it was dark when they came, which is really scary, but, it began to get light out.
Right.
And so cars drove by, the kids' school buses drove by. So all of our neighbors, all of our friends,
it looked like a meth bust to your neighbors.
Exactly. And at one point, when my daughter realized my school bus is going by and everybody's going to see this, and she made some comment, the deputy sheriff said, "You can't tell anybody what's going on here."
So the gag order not only applied to you, but also to your children, that they were told.
And my husband.
This is what's very unusual about the John Doe investigation, because grand jury investigations may have some secrecy, but it's only in Wisconsin that we have a rule that basically says we can come and we can raid your house, and then you cannot talk about it.
Right. And you know, I remember well enough what it was like to be 15 or 17 as my kids were at the time. And, you know, the thought and the prospect of them having to go to school with their friends and our neighbors, knowing that, you know, they saw there were 6 armed people, and they were hauling, you know, our computers, our files, and putting them into police vehicles right before everybody's eyes. You know, I read recently an account of another raid where somebody said, oh, well, you know, one of the prosecutors said, this is really a good deal for you that you can't tell anybody because no one's going to know what we're talking about. Well, yeah, so now my neighbors think I'm dealing drugs or you know, something else. And it really is very stressful.
Well, I want to talk about that and how stressful it is more with Deb Jordahl when we come back in a moment. In describing the raids on the homes of conservative activists by John Doe investigators, Supreme Court Justice David Prosser wrote, quote, "The search warrants and the subpoenas in this case are so broad and so extensive that they make the fruits of the legendary Watergate break-in look insignificant by comparison." We're talking with one of the targets of this investigation. So you described how you had armed agents come into your house when it was still dark, seizing your computers, your phones, the computers of your children. I'm guessing that there was a lot of information that had nothing to do with Republican politics, the Scott Walker campaign, or conservative politics on those devices. What did they actually seize? What sorts of information?
Well, you know, my life is on my computer. I have a business and a partner, and we have other clients. And so everything that we do from a business standpoint was in their hands. All of our bank records, you know, if I'm carrying bank records for a nonprofit that I'm working for, those are on there. All of my emails, all of my personal correspondence with people, medical documents relating to my kids or to me, they had it all. And then they had my husband's computer and my daughter's computer. And what we saw.
So we're talking about thousands of documents of all of this personal information in the hands of prosecutors who clearly have an agenda.
Right, and you know, and then they had external hard drives that go back, you know, countless years. And what we saw in the first leg of the John Doe investigation is that they were willing to, and a judge allowed them to just throw out 60,000 emails that belonged to one target that had absolutely nothing to do with the crimes that she was being accused of.
I have to ask you about this because the state Supreme Court has basically exonerated you, has said that you committed no crime, you did nothing wrong, has told the prosecutors that they need to destroy the evidence and return everything that they seized. However, we have seen document dumps. We have seen much of this evidence that cannot be used in the court of law being used in the court of public opinion. In fact, we saw that late last week where there were documents that were released from the first John Doe. Are you concerned? Are you concerned that some of the material that was seized from your house, from your family, might be leaked out in that particular way?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the prosecutor is fighting the return of the property, is fighting the court orders to return it and to destroy it. And they have been collecting evidence against people around Scott Walker since 2010, so we're talking 5 years. And they have maybe 3 million or more emails from both investigations. And so until all of it is identified and returned and destroyed, and everybody who's had any access to it understands that they will be charged with a crime if they divulge it or share it, I'm not going to feel comfortable. I probably never will.
How hard was it, though? I mean, I've talked about this on the radio. That people sometimes forget that people involved in politics are still people, and they have families. What has this been like for people to understand, leaving aside the Walker campaign, the politics? What is it like to have armed guards come in, you know, wake up your children, and basically, you know, take possession of all of your personal items, and then threaten you with criminal prosecution?
It's surreal. You know, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this warrant, and the first thing I said to my husband is, these people are never going to stop. You know, this is Milwaukee County Prosecutor John Chisholm, and he was not going to stop until they destroyed Scott Walker once and for all. And you know, I know these people hate me. They hate Scott Walker, and they have all of my
I mean, you have not been able to talk about this for a year and a half. You've had this cloud over your head, and the John Doe investigation is supposed to protect your privacy and your secrecy, but your name's been leaked out there. People know that you were subject to this investigation.
Well, you know, Charlie, it's a little disingenuous of these prosecutors to say that the John Doe is being used to protect me, when not only do they leak the information out, but they have a very public raid on my home.
Yeah.
It's completely disingenuous. And in fact, I think, you know, Justice Prosser pointed out the fact that they had everything that they said they were seeking in the warrant before they ever came into my home.
Well, what do you say to the defenders of the investigation who say that this was really about protecting the electoral process, that this was about looking for dark money in politics? Did you do anything wrong, do you think?
No, we didn't do anything wrong. And, you know, the John Doe judge, their hand-picked John Doe judge, quashed the subpoenas and ordered the return of our property in January, very shortly after they came to our homes. Judge Randa in federal court said the same thing, and a majority on the state Supreme Court said the same thing.
So what then is this investigation about?
It's about hardcore politics. That's all it's about. And, you know, honestly, Charlie, even if they had a legitimate legal theory, even if they had reason to suspect and probable cause, this is never how a campaign finance violation or alleged campaign finance violation is investigated.
I mean, there have been stories. There was the late Michael Lutz who said that he believed that there was a partisan animus involved in this, that John Chisholm made it his personal mission to go after Scott Walker. Do you think that? I mean, you've been at the center of this. Is this a partisan attack?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, I think it's unfortunate that there were a number of people along the way who had an opportunity to stand up and say, let's not do this. But, you know, prosecutors are notoriously risk adverse.
Yeah.
And so I think there were a lot of people, judges and prosecutors along the way, who didn't want to stop it, who didn't want to get involved, didn't want to get their fingernails dirty, so they allowed this, you know, sort of lipstick on a pig, if you will, this special prosecutor who really was never in charge, to kind of cover up the fact that it was really Milwaukee, and only Milwaukee and the Government Accountability Board.
Okay, the Supreme Court did something that was really quite unusual. It not only threw out the case rather definitively, but it said several times that you were innocent, that you had been exonerated, that you had broken no law. So, is it over? Or if you get your life back, do you get your reputation back? Is this done as far as you're concerned?
No, it's never going to be completely over, because there are documents, as you said, that were leaked. Their one-sided accusations of us are on the internet for forever, and there's all kinds of, you know, liberal publications that have written about it and put their spin on it. The scars are never going to go away. The stress, I will probably never know the impact that this has had on my children. I find myself in situations that make me very nervous and afraid, that didn't used to make me nervous and afraid. But
your children were worried that their mom was going to go to jail.
Yes, and you know, and they also had the stress of having their friends wondering, what's wrong with your family, you know? I mean, this just doesn't happen in suburban Middleton, Wisconsin. People don't raid people's homes, and they couldn't talk about that. And, you know, it's very stressful to go through this, but then not to be able to tell people that care about you and that support you what's gone on. I mean, we were fortunate that Eric O'Keefe from the Wisconsin Club for Growth, he put himself at great risk to come out publicly and explain what this investigation was about.
Okay, we're going to take a break here. More with Deb Jordahl in just a moment, but first here's your morning news update. When we come back, we'll talk about what happens next. Welcome back. Our guest is blogger, commentator, activist, political consultant Deb Jordahl, one of the former targets of the John Doe investigation. So, Deb, I guess the question is, what happens now? You've been exonerated by the state Supreme Court. The case has been thrown out. The prosecutors have been ordered to return your stuff. What do you want to see happen now?
Well, the prosecutors have not given up the idea of trying to appeal this to the Supreme Court. They really have no grounds to do so. So
you're not concerned the gag order is going to come back and that you're going to get in trouble for having this conversation with me right now?
I'm not concerned about the gag order, and I think, frankly, that the gag order is unconstitutional. There was a judge in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago who said as much. What I'm concerned about is that we need to get all of our stuff back. It all needs to be destroyed, and people need to be held accountable, and they need to understand that if they disclose any of this information, that they will go to jail.
Do you think the media in this state understands the First Amendment implications of this?
No, I don't. I think the media in this state thinks that the First Amendment was written for them and only for them. They look at our groups with disdain. They don't like what we do. In many ways, we do their job, filling in information on issues that they don't cover thoroughly anymore. And so they believe that what we do should be illegal or should be further, more disclosed. And so they will not give us any room here. There's an editorial writer in Madison who said that what we do is worse than gangbanging or drug dealing.
Well, what's interesting is people outside of Wisconsin are shocked and horrified when they hear these stories that this could happen in America, that a partisan investigator would go after his, political opponents in this particular way. And yet here it seems that not only has the media been supportive of the John Doe investigation, that they have been more interested in getting your stuff, in effect, having the leaks, being partners with the prosecutors.
Sure, I think that the reporters over at the Journal-Sentinel would love nothing more than to go through my personal email. Yours too.
And some of them may be the same ones. Hey, thanks for joining us. Join me for my radio show Monday morning. It's on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.